No, fair enough, Jeff. But before you sort of move us past that and sort of give us the ultimate so what, the so what that I'm hearing from this is that you may be jumping on my bandwagon and thinking that there's a bunch of colleges going to close or merge. Am I hearing you right?
Well, I'm still not there, Michael. I know the fiscal reality is pretty dire. As somebody we both know, Robert Kelcham, he recently pointed out in an analysis, and we'll add it to the show notes, that more than 40% of private colleges posted a loss in 2023. Let me repeat that. More than 40% of private colleges posted a loss in 2023, and 20% of public colleges did. And as he found, there were like 50 plus colleges that have been running deficits for 8 or more of the last 10 years, right? Essentially regular deficit spending. So I still hold out hope, Michael, for deeper partnerships instead of mergers and closures. But, I think that there are more people in your camp than in my camp, because whenever I bring that up, people say never going to happen, right? Colleges will close before they really have to partner with their competitors or others, or even merge with them. It was once said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And what I think is going to finally happen this year, in this year of reckoning, is that persistent deficits really have a way of changing, I think, a college's strategies. But I think two things are going to have to happen for those deeper partnerships, or else they are going to go the way you think I know a lot of colleges are going to go, which is closure or mergers. I think that the two things that are going to have to happen, one is leaders need to assign a team or a person to really think about what these deeper partnerships look like. I think too much of this has been done kind of on the side of the desk, and it really requires a lot of brain power and time. And leaders are going to have to assign somebody to do that. The second thing is culture, and this may be a bridge too far. Institutions, they're not built fundamentally to work with each other, right? In many ways, it's why they were created as separate institutions in the first place. And, last fall on the show, I suggested colleges develop this master plan for culture, much like they have a strategic plan. I'm going to be writing about this a lot more in the year ahead, but I think that this idea of shifting the culture of higher ed so that more of these partnerships can happen is going to be absolutely critical.
Yeah, well, it won't surprise you, Jeff. I love both of those ideas. I think if you don't task someone with it, it's no one's job. And I love this idea of culture. Obviously, I've written about it a lot. It's a whole, week in my class that I teach at Hugsy at Harvard. And as Diane Tavner is fond of telling me, every organization has a culture. The question is if it's a culture you like and are intentional about building, or if it's one that sort of just bubbles up and happens and frankly then dilutes your strategy. So we will see where that goes. But if that's the state of play, then, what's the so what, if you will? What's it all going to add up to in your mind?
Well, I think it's going to end up, as I pointed out in my piece in the newsletter, right? The end of like this idea of comprehensive U, right? This idea that a university does everything. I think we should expect to see the shuttering of majors like we already have at many colleges and universities, the consolidation of schools within those universities, a rethinking of athletics, the end of graduate programs. We know that Boston University, for example, last November decided to suspend admissions in a dozen humanities and social science disciplines. And one reason was, the academic job outlook wasn't good for those students. So why even have those programs? And I really do suggest that folks go back to listen to that episode that we had with Len Casuto last year about the future of the PhD. And we'll be certain to link to that in the show notes. But I think really, Michael, this is the reckoning that's probably most needed. And if we kind of think about the end of comprehensive U, it really creates this much needed differentiation in the market. So instead of every college trying to be like the one across town or another rung up on the ladder in the rankings, I think the fiscal and demographic realities will really require institutions to figure out where they want to play in the decade ahead. And until now, I don't think the realities have been enough to push colleges and universities to shift course. But as we know, and we're going to talk about this hopefully on a future episode of Future U, is the Carnegie classifications are changing. And that's likely to result in how states fund public colleges and how U.S. News classifies colleges. Those things might be enough to finally incentivize colleges and universities to say, you know what, we don't have to be all these things. twice before, Michael, I love reading the history of higher ed. And twice before, we went through this period of rapid change in response to shifting societal needs and disruption in the economy. The first was in the years after the Industrial Revolution, when hundreds of colleges closed. So it has happened before. But many new ones, including many of today's land grant universities, opened to serve the needs of society that was being, mechanized. The second was in the late 1960s, as the baby boomers were graduating from high school and the Great Society programs of the Johnson era were coming into being. It really encouraged higher education to expand to the comprehensive system that we have today. And so perhaps now, Michael, we're in a third era, one where, as David Brooks pointed out in his much discovered cover piece in The Atlantic back in December, that there's this new meritocracy. And as he pointed out, this new meritocracy will help each person identify, nurture, and pursue the ruling passion of their soul. Now, great writing by David Brooks, but perhaps maybe a little bit overly optimistic and simplistic on his part. But just imagine if we had this differentiation in the marketplace, the different types of institutions, programs, and pathways after high school, that we could finally have that better match up to the goals of students and their families, right? It's the jobs to be done theory, right? It's exactly, it takes all of the writing that you've done in all of your books over the last couple of years and to finally say, yes, we could finally do this.
So I find it really interesting. I actually think, Jeff, I'm reflecting on this probably since season 2 or 3, this theme of differentiation and being distinct and making that a part of your strategy, I think has popped up at some point every single season. And we've both said, they got to go here. I think it's really,
and now we're in season 8 and they still haven't gone there.
They still haven't gone there. But I think you have, I guess the way I would say it is, I think you are right in that if they are, and this is probably the answer, right? If they're to break out of the prediction that I've made, the way to do it is to focus and stop being all things to all people, nail the job to be done. To your point, I think you're spot on. I think strategic differentiation would be good. Frankly, it would reduce administrative overhead costs. If people want to hear my rant on that, they can find that episode from a couple seasons ago, right? About my view that administrative bloat is a direct function of trying to be all things to all people. I also think, interestingly enough, cutting majors and things like that, there's a whole bunch of tenure considerations they're going to have to get over to make that work. But that may actually be the window into partnerships with other universities. I remember I was advising one president and he said, I don't think we can do I can't remember, English and this and that majors anymore. I was like, well, don't cut it in your course catalog. Just partner with another university and have them give it to you online for the 4 students that do want to sign up for it. But you stop, incurring all that cost. And so I do think that actually, interestingly enough, may be the window into the partnerships that you've been hoping for a while. I also think that the Carnegie Foundation's revised Carnegie classifications, when it comes out, may be fuel for this, Jeff, as they won't necessarily encourage comprehensiveness for its own sake, and will likely even give R1 status to institutions that have smaller, more narrowly tailored research footprints. So